In the year of our Lord 1392, something ancient and evil stirred in the heart of France. It would not be plague that would bring the kingdom to its knees. It would not be war, though war would come. It would be madness. A madness so complete, so horrifying in its manifestations, that even learned men of the church whispered of possession, of demons walking in the flesh of a king. This is the story of Charles VI of France, Charles the Beloved, Charles the Mad, the king who talked to shadows, who believed his body was made of glass, who forgot his own wife and children existed, the king whose mind became a battleground between sanity and something far darker, a man whose very soul seemed to have been invaded by forces that medieval chroniclers could only describe as demonic. But madness, as history teaches us, is a luxury only the powerless can afford. When a king goes mad, kingdoms burn. December 3rd, 1368. Paris trembles under a winter sky the color of old blood. In the royal residence of Hotel Saint-Paul, a child is born who will one day hold the fate of Europe in his fragile hands. Charles, son of Charles V the Wise, enters the world as heir to the most powerful throne in Christendom. But power, like madness, is a curse that runs in families. His mother, Joanna of Bourbon, carries shadows in her bloodline. Her father, her brother, herself, all touched by the same darkness that will one day claim her son. Mental illness, the physicians of the time call it, when they are feeling charitable. When they are not, they speak in hushed tones of family curses, of sins visited upon the sons. The boy's childhood is torn apart piece by piece. At 9, his mother dies. 2 years later, his father follows her to the grave. Charles VI becomes King of France at 11 years old, a child wearing a crown that weighs more than his soul can bear. But children, even king children, are not meant to rule. His uncles take control, selfish, grasping men who strip the kingdom bare, while the boy king learns to hunt and joust and pretend that the weight of 10 million souls does not rest upon his shoulders. For 20 years, Charles seems almost normal. He marries Isabeau of Bavaria, a beautiful woman who loves him desperately at first. He has children. He takes control of his kingdom from his uncle's greedy hands, and for a brief moment, France breathes easier under his rule. They call him Charles the Beloved. They have no idea what is coming. August 5th, 1392. The heat hangs heavy over the forest road to Le Mans like a funeral shroud. Charles VI rides with his retinue through the oppressive summer air, his mind already fevered with rage over an attempt on his friend Olivier de Clison's life. The would-be assassin has fled to Brittany, and Charles means to have justice. But justice, on this day, will have to wait. The forest seems to whisper as they ride. Ancient oaks lean in like conspirators, their branches blocking out the sun until the king's party moves through a twilight world of green shadows and dancing light. The horses grow restless. The men speak in hushed voices. Then a figure appears on the path ahead. A madman, some say later. A leper. A beggar dressed in nothing but rags and prophecy. He stumbles toward the royal party, his voice carrying through the stillness like the tolling of a funeral bell. "Go no further, noble king. You are betrayed. Turn back." The guards move to strike him down, but Charles raises a hand. Something in the madman's eyes holds him transfixed. Something that recognizes something else. The beggar disappears into the forest as suddenly as he appeared, leaving only his words echoing in the green silence. The king's men exchange glances. They should turn back. Every instinct screams at them to turn back. But kings do not turn back. Kings ride forward, even into hell itself. An hour later, a page drops the king's lance. The metal clangs against metal, against a helmet, against a breastplate. In the oppressive heat and tension, the sound explodes like thunder, and Charles VI of France goes completely, utterly mad. His sword clears its scabbard with a sound like tearing silk. His spurs drive deep into his horse's flanks. The animal screams and rears, but Charles drives it forward into his own men with a fury that seems to come from someplace deeper than human rage. "Kill the traitors!" he screams, his voice no longer his own. "They seek to destroy me. Kill them all!" The king who was beloved becomes a demon in human flesh. His sword rises and falls, rises and falls. 4 of his own knights die under his blade before his retinue can finally overwhelm him. They drag him from his horse, but even pinned to the ground, he writhes and snarls like a wild animal. His eyes, witnesses will later swear, are no longer the eyes of a man. For 3 days, Charles lies unconscious. When he awakens, he remembers nothing. The gentle, pious king has returned, horrified by the blood on his clothes, confused by the fear in his servants' eyes. But something has been awakened, something that will never sleep again. The episodes come with increasing frequency after the forest. 3 months of madness, then 5 months of lucidity, 9 months of ravings, then 3 months of peace. The pattern becomes as regular as the seasons, and far more terrible. During his lucid periods, Charles is still the king his people remember, intelligent, pious, desperately sorry for whatever darkness has consumed him during the Black Months. He reforms laws, tends to his kingdom, tries to be the ruler France deserves. But when the madness comes, he becomes something else entirely. He forgets he is king. He forgets his wife Isabeau, ordering her away when she tries to visit him, asking his servants who this strange woman is and why she will not leave him alone. He forgets his children, staring at them with the blank confusion of a man looking at strangers. Sometimes he believes he is St. George, complete with a lion pierced by a sword on his coat of arms. Sometimes he runs naked through the corridors of his palace, screaming about enemies who exist only in his fractured mind. His attendants wall up the entrances to keep him contained, but still he runs, still he screams, still he claws at stones that will not yield. For 5 months in 1405 he refuses to bathe or change his clothes. The smell of the King of France becomes legendary in its own right. Servants draw lots to determine who must enter his chambers. But it is the glass delusion that haunts him most persistently, and haunts those who must watch him suffer through it. Charles VI, King of France, becomes convinced that his body is made of glass. He demands that iron rods be sewn into his clothing to protect him from shattering. Wooden planks are strapped to his back and chest. He cannot bear to be touched, cannot bear to move too quickly, cannot bear the thought that one wrong step will send him crashing into 1,000 glittering pieces. The most powerful man in Europe lives in constant terror of breaking. His courtiers watch in horror as their king attempts to navigate his daily life, while believing himself to be made of the most fragile substance known to man. He shuffles rather than walks. He speaks in whispers for fear that too loud a voice might crack his glass throat. When he must sign documents, he does so with infinite care, terrified that the pressure of the quill might shatter his glass fingers. The physicians are baffled. They bleed him, purge him, examine his urine and feces for signs of the imbalance in his humors that must surely be causing this affliction. Nothing works. The madness has its own schedule, its own rules, its own terrible logic. And slowly, carefully, those closest to the king begin to whisper the word that explains everything and nothing: possession. In an age when the supernatural and natural worlds bleed into one another like watercolors in rain, possession is not just possible, it is likely. Medieval minds understand that demons walk among men, that evil spirits can inhabit human flesh, that the devil himself wages war for human souls. And what soul would be more valuable to Satan than that of the King of France? The learned men of the church study Charles's symptoms with the grim focus of soldiers preparing for battle. His loss of memory, his violent rages, his belief that he is someone else entirely, these are not the signs of mere illness. These are the hallmarks of demonic invasion. During his episodes, Charles speaks with voices that are not his own. He demonstrates knowledge he should not possess. He shows strength far beyond what his slight frame should allow. When they try to restrain him during his violent fits, it takes 6 men to hold him down, and sometimes even that is not enough. Most damning of all, he seems to know things about his courtiers that he could not possibly know. During one episode, he accuses a nobleman of adultery with specific details that later prove accurate. During another, he predicts the death of a rival with such precision that the man's family begs the court physicians to exorcise their king before his prophecies can come to pass. The line between madness and possession blurs until it disappears entirely. Priests are summoned. Exorcisms are performed. Holy relics are brought from across Europe to be placed near the king's person in hopes that their sanctity might drive out whatever evil has taken residence in his flesh. Sometimes, briefly, they seem to work. Charles will calm during the rituals, his ravings subsiding into exhausted sleep. But the peace never lasts. The demons, if demons they are, always return, and each time they return, they are stronger. France bleeds while its king battles invisible enemies. With Charles lost to his madness for months at a time, his uncles reassert their control over the kingdom. The Duke of Burgundy and the Duke of Orléans circle the throne like vultures, each seeking to be the power behind the powerless king. The people, who once called Charles the Beloved, now whisper the Mad in the same tones they might use to discuss plague or famine. Their king has become a source of fear rather than comfort, an object of pity rather than respect. The English, seeing weakness, strike. Henry V lands in France with an army and begins carving up the kingdom piece by piece. At Agincourt in 1415, the flower of French knighthood dies in the mud, while their mad king cowers in his palace, convinced that touching the door handle might cause his glass body to shatter. In his lucid moments, Charles is forced to confront what his madness has cost his realm. He signs the Treaty of Troyes in 1420, essentially handing France over to the English and disinheriting his own son in favor of Henry V of England. The King of France, in his desperate attempts to save his kingdom from the chaos his madness has unleashed, destroys France more thoroughly than any foreign invader ever could. His wife Isabeau, driven to desperation by years of living with a man who alternately loves her passionately and fails to recognize her existence, takes lovers. His children grow up fearing their father's return to consciousness almost as much as they fear his episodes of madness. The court becomes a place of whispers and shadows, where no one dares speak too loudly for fear of triggering another attack. Servants tiptoe through corridors. Nobles choose their words with the care of men defusing explosives. France itself begins to feel cursed. As the years pass and the episodes grow worse, even Charles begins to believe the whispers about demonic possession. During his periods of clarity, he speaks with his confessor about the terrible things he has done, the people he has hurt, the kingdom he has failed. But it is not guilt that haunts him most. It is the knowledge that whatever takes control of his body during his mad episodes is not him. He describes the sensation to those closest to him in terms that chill the blood. He can see what his body is doing during the attacks, can hear the words coming from his mouth, but he cannot control any of it. He is a prisoner in his own flesh, watching helplessly as something else uses his voice, his hands, his royal authority to spread chaos and fear. The thing that possesses him, he tells his confessor, knows things that he does not know. It speaks languages he has never learned. It demonstrates knowledge of events that have not yet happened. Most terrifying of all, it knows his thoughts. During his lucid periods, Charles can feel it there in the darkness of his mind, watching, waiting, learning. It feeds on his fears, his regrets, his desperate love for his family and kingdom. It uses these emotions against him, turning his very humanity into a weapon for his own destruction. The physicians can find no natural cause for his condition. His body, when examined during his calm periods, shows no signs of disease or injury. His humors appear balanced. His physical health is, if anything, remarkably good for a man of his age and the stresses of his position. This only strengthens the belief that what afflicts Charles VI is not of this world. Stories begin to circulate about the king's supernatural episodes. Servants report seeing strange shadows in his chambers when he is alone. Guards swear they have heard multiple voices coming from his room when only the king is present. Courtiers whisper that during his worst episodes, the very air around Charles seems to grow cold, as if something is drawing the warmth from the world itself. Whether these stories are true or merely the product of terrified imaginations fed by superstition, they become part of the king's legend. Charles VI is no longer just a mad king. He is a king possessed, a man whose very soul has become a battleground between the forces of heaven and hell. October 21st, 1422. Charles VI of France lies dying in the same palace where he was born 54 years earlier. The madness has claimed him one final time, and this time there will be no recovery, no return to lucidity, no chance to make amends for the chaos his condition has unleashed upon the world. France is in ruins. The English control everything north of the Loire River. His son, the Dauphin, has been disinherited and replaced by Henry V of England as heir to the French throne. The kingdom that Charles inherited as one of the most powerful in Europe has been carved up like a feast day roast. And still, even as he dies, the whispers of possession follow him to the grave. His final words, according to those present, are not the words of a dying king making peace with God. They are the ravings of a man still fighting an invisible enemy, still pleading with unseen tormentors to leave him in peace. The priests perform the last rites. but even they seem uncertain whether they are blessing a king or exorcising a demon. Charles VI dies as he lived for 30 years, caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. The boy who was beloved becomes the king who was feared, and finally the man who was pitied. But his death does not end the questions about what truly possessed him. Medical historians will spend centuries trying to diagnose his condition, suggesting everything from schizophrenia to bipolar disorder to hereditary madness. Each generation applies its own understanding to the mystery of the Mad King. Yet for those who lived through his reign, who witnessed firsthand the transformation of a gentle, pious young man into something that seemed barely human, the explanation remains as it was in life. Charles VI was not mad. Charles VI was possessed. In the end, perhaps it does not matter whether Charles VI of France was mentally ill or demonically possessed. Perhaps the distinction itself is meaningless to those who suffered under his reign. What matters is that a king's madness became a kingdom's curse, that one man's breakdown became a nation's tragedy, that the most powerful throne in medieval Europe became a symbol of powerlessness in the face of forces beyond human understanding or control. The physicians bled him and found no poison in his veins. The priests exorcised him and found no demons in his flesh. The historians studied him and found no simple answers to explain the destruction of a king and a kingdom. But those who lived through the reign of Charles the Mad understood something that textbooks and medical journals can never capture. They understood that there are some kinds of darkness that resist both diagnosis and prayer, some kinds of brokenness that cannot be healed by either medicine or miracles. Charles VI believed he was made of glass, and perhaps he was right. Perhaps we all are. Perhaps the only difference between kings and commoners is that when kings shatter, they take whole kingdoms down with them. The Mad King of France lies in his tomb in the Basilica of Saint-Denis, surrounded by the remains of centuries of French royalty. His madness is quiet now, his demons, real or imagined, finally at rest. But sometimes, on winter nights when the wind howls through the ancient stones, the guardians of the basilica swear they can still hear the sound of glass breaking in the darkness, and in that sound, the echo of a kingdom's fall, the whisper of a crown's curse, the final laughter of whatever it was that lived inside the mind of Charles VI of France. The king who was so twisted by his affliction that his own people believed the devil himself had come to dance in the halls of power, wearing the flesh of the man who should have been their salvation. Some demons, it seems, prefer to wear crowns,